Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Transitions Collective. I'm your host, Mary Clavier, and I am here with Lauren Rosenthal from Birdie. Lauren is building an amazing new platform that I'm excited for her to tell you more about. And I'll be asking her a little bit about her journey through working in corporate America to now leaving her job and working on Birdie full time and what's in store for her for the future. So I'm super excited to bring this episode to you, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Lauren.
Hello. How are you?
Great, thanks. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start out by giving our viewers a little background on, a little more about you and a little bit on your background and about your family. Can you share with us?
Sure. So some background on me. I'm currently living in New York, but splitting my time between here in San Francisco, which is where my better half lives. My boyfriend is out in the Bay Area, but most of my family is in the Northeast. So my immediate family. So this is the home base. I'm originally from Midwest and grew up in South Florida. So I've been all over lots of different areas of the country. Yeah. And went to school in Michigan for both college and grad school. So a big super Wolverine, bleed blue, like most Michigan alums do. And yeah, and for the most part, been in New York. So this whole being bi-coastal thing is very new. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Excellent. Okay. And we'll get into more of the details about Birdie later, but can you give us an overview of Birdie and what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I started working on Birdie about 2.5 years ago. And I was working on it on the side, nights and weekends, side hustle, while I was working at the Hearst Corporation, which is where I was until a couple of months ago. And yeah, so Birdie, do you want me to give a little bit of an overview of what Birdie is, or should we get to? Okay.
Yes,
so
please.
Birdie is really, think of Goodreads. For those of you who are familiar with Goodreads, it's Goodreads meets Yelp. So instead of discovering new places, restaurants and bars through strangers like you do on Yelp through, hundreds or millions, I guess, of strangers, you discover places through your personal network on Birdie. So if you're searching you live in New York and you're going to the Lower East Side and you want to find a great sushi spot, instead of seeing reviews from hundreds of people you don't know, you would do a search for sushi on the Lower East Side, and you might only see 2 reviews, but it'll be from people you trust. And even though, again, you don't have the volume, it's much more powerful because it's a trustworthy source. So it's like Instagram, where you follow people. So you would, even if hundreds of people have reviewed that particular restaurant, you'll only see the reviews from the 2 people you know.
Yep. Excellent. Thanks for going through that. So I'll get to some specifics later. I actually did leave some chirps and I used the system, so I really liked it. Yep. And as someone that travels a lot too, or traveled for my corporate job in the past, I think it makes a big difference. I'm not a big user of Yelp for exactly that reason. It's a little, it's not really trustworthy for me. So I don't usually go that route. So cool. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing in your day job, your corporate life, before you started Birdie, and how you ended up coming to be with Birdie?
Yeah, so I actually started Birdie just before my most recent corporate gig. I started it right beforehand, actually. So I was always working on it on the side, but I was working at Hearst, which is actually where I am right now because I just had lunch with an old colleague. But I started here because the co-founder of the company that I had previously worked at was working here, and he brought me over. I started as a consultant because I didn't want to take a full-time job while I was working on Birdie, but I did want to have some income since I'm bootstrapping Birdie. So I was working in a division of Hearst that was called Hearst Business Media. It actually doesn't exist anymore. They kind of changed the org structure a few months ago, but it was a portfolio of data as a service and software as a service businesses in healthcare, transportation, and financial services. So it was a portfolio, almost like a holding company of businesses, mostly, actually only one of them was in New York, mostly on the West Coast and in the South and the Midwest. So I did more general operations project management. and, worked on, building some of the programs for the centralized administrative layer for that division.
Okay. So you
super
were
sexy.
Yeah. Well, you're my productivity soul sister.
Yes.
you,
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of process engineering and making, for instance, the capital budgeting process, which is incredibly painful for a lot of people, trying to take a lot of the pain and the inefficiency out of it. So that since everyone in the corporation, or at least, I was focused on our division, but everyone in the division would have to spend a lot of time and energy on the capital budgeting process every year. So put together a playbook and revamped the process so that, if people have to spend collectively, say, for example, 6 weeks of their team's time, if we could actually bring that down to like 3 weeks of their time, that's saving a lot of people a lot of time and money.
Right. So so when you started there, you already had the idea, or you were already building Birdie?
Yes. Yeah. I had started working on Birdie. And so, it was very much after hours and, nights and weekends which was tough, but I was the company I'd been at previously was a startup. So I was very used to my standard working hours being more like 80 to 90 hour weeks.
Yeah.
So when I started at Hearst as a contractor and ended up joining full time because it was actually very reasonable hours. So I was able to do Hearst 9 to 5 and then Birdie the other hours. So I had the same hours. I was working 80 hours a week. Just
right. Yes.
Yeah.
And
so I already had it going. Sorry.
And partially for yourself.
Yep.
So where did you think of the idea for Birdie?
So I thought of Birdie probably 8 or 9 years ago. It was just my growing frustration with how trustworthy the lack of trust that I felt on a lot of the platforms that exist. I think TripAdvisor and Yelp and the review platforms are brilliant. I think they're amazing. I think they've done so much more good in this world. And I think that they're directionally phenomenal. I just think that they haven't that last iteration that is necessary in order to make things relevant and personal and much more powerful. And that trust element is lacking. So I travel a ton, and I think it's the combination of I travel a ton and and I have FOMO. I want to make sure if I'm going to whatever city, I go to the best restaurant, and I don't want to come home and somebody say, "Oh, why didn't you go to this place?" And that I didn't hear about it. I want to make sure that I go to the best ice cream shop and the best pancake place for breakfast. And I end up spending a lot of time and energy doing research before I go on trips or before I plan a birthday dinner or something. And a lot of people do this. And I'd spend so much time and energy, and I'm also a process engineer and a tremendous list keeper. So whenever I go on trips, I come home and I put together all of my lists of my recommendations because I'm like, I just got back from Santa Fe, but I know somebody's going to be going soon and they're going to ask for my recommendations. I want to do it while it's still fresh. And lo and behold, I've sent around these Google Docs that I put together hundreds of times, literally.
Yeah.
And I have one for Paris that I've been to. I think I was there about 18 months ago. I sent it 3 times last week. So
I've sent so many things on Paris. My husband's from France and lived in Paris for a couple years. So all of my friends come to me, and it's the same kind of thing. I'm always digging up an email like, oh, what am I going to tell them? Wait, I already told someone else about this.
And then you're searching for that email, and you're just like, and I'm a process engineer. So I created a Google Doc folder and a naming convention so that I could easily find things. But it always irked me and stressed me out that I would send this one email to somebody, that reached out to me for Paris recommendations, but I probably know tons of other people who are going to Paris who would like that information. So it's the whole concept that I think it's in technology. I'm going to butcher the term, but I think it's called like write once, read everywhere. If I'm, or you respond to a Facebook post of somebody's going to Santa Fe and I, say, okay, go to these 3 places. I've responded to that. If you post it, I've responded to you, but the other 500 people I know on Facebook aren't going to see that.
Right.
So I wanted Birdie to be a very efficient way. So more like a utility, like a kayak of aggregating a lot of content, not only what my friends recommend. So I wanted to be able to harness that very effectively, but also when I'm reading a magazine or somebody tells me about something, I want to be able to capture it as a place I want to try, so that right before that, I was literally ripping out pages from Travel and Leisure. I had an iPhone notes list. I had a Pinterest board. There were, 7 places I would keep content, but I would never actually go back to that. I put it in my iPhone notes list because I felt good writing it down, but I would never reference it again.
Right.
And the content would be lost. So Birdie is, again, back to your original question of why I thought of it, it's just frustration with the fact that this tool didn't exist. And because I'm a process engineer, like, I think that I can actually formulate something that will be a lot more efficient and a better use of people's time. I want people to be able to, I'm building it for if it's something that I'll find really useful, I have to believe other people will too. And if I can do a search for, I'm on a phenomenal vacation and I'm trying to, I'm sitting in Paris, I'm sitting by, in a park. I want to be able to be present in the moment and enjoy my time there rather than looking down at my phone, looking to figure out where to go to dinner. So the hope is utility. You do a quick search. I'm connected with your husband on Birdie, and I see a place, he's like best restaurant in Paris. I can, in 60 seconds, hopefully I can look up and be more present in the moment. And I feel very confident that I have a really good recommendation for how I'm going to spend my time.
Yep. And you're not flipping through an outdated, guidebook on what are the restaurants and, oh, that one's not there anymore or something.
Yeah. And it's just, having it be live and like when I imported from my iPhone notes list into Birdie, which I never add anything into my iPhone notes list anymore. It's been sunset. It's all in Birdie now. And I would say it's New York. So there's a lot of turnover, at least, 5 to 10% of the places had closed.
Yeah.
So,
you're keeping it more up to date. So this is super interesting for me. And another reason why I wanted to talk to you was just the idea of building. So I have a product-based business. It's extremely interesting to me to hear about people that are building software and tools and like electronic kind of businesses. So where did you start with that? So you had this idea for Birdie, and then what do you do? Do you go get a designer or a developer right away, or how does that work?
It was a very roundabout, as much as I'm a process engineer, very inefficient way. It was a learning, I should say, how I came about it. So I met, when I met a gentleman who, I became friendly with, who actually, he, stayed at my apartment. He sublet my apartment while I was doing some traveling, which is one of the trips that I actually came up with the idea for Birdie. I went to Cartagena, and he had just come back from Cartagena on a school trip. And he's like, oh, I have all these recommendations I can send you. He sent me an email that had probably 5 other emails worth of content in it that he'd collected for Cartagena. And everyone was recommending the same places just over and over again. And I'm like, we got to do better than this, people. And so anywho, he was doing fundraising for his app. He was in his second year at HBS, and he was doing fundraising for an app that he was building. And we just hit it off and really liked each other. So when he moved to New York, we would grab coffee every now and then to talk about what we were doing. And I was actually working on a separate startup at the time, and we can come back to that. But I decided to put that on hold and work on Birdie. And I'm like, you've built an app, you know all of the steps. So can I hire you on as a project manager, and I can just literally carbon copy everything you've done because you know all the who, what, where, when. So he really did a lot of the graphic. He's more of a graphic designer, but he did the graphic design, a lot of the general strategy and wireframing and whatnot. And he helped me hire a developer, and I didn't vet the developer as much as I should have. And I didn't really speak the language to know what I was looking for. So I hired a developer, and we built an iOS app. And I thought it was a lot easier and more out of the box, and it wasn't as nuanced. And so we built an iOS app, and it was not built well because he was a front-end designer, not a back-end designer or developer, sorry. And Birdie is so much more heavily dependent on the back end. And so we actually ended up having to just throw it away. So I guess to answer your question, find somebody who's done something very similar and ask for their advice, because you're going to have to, pave your own path, because not every product is different. But if you can get 80% of the way there, at least knowing the major elements. So then when I had to find a new developer, a little birdie told me. I went through my personal network and found, talked to a lot of people, to a lot of developers, and then just found somebody who I really trusted because I'd been so burned the first time, and somebody who I felt like I was in good hands with. So there's a lot of components that are a learning to me, and I'm not a technologist, and I'm definitely hurting because of that. But I've gotten this far. So I'm now just bringing in, I have a really solid development team, and then I hired a contractor to do the product design. And so I'm filling in as needed.
Excellent. So this is a couple years in the making that you were doing all of this, and then you more recently left your job.
Yeah, so full-time as of, just a few months ago.
Amazing. I love it. So how did you know that it was time for you to leave? Did you have a certain goal in mind that you wanted to achieve, or how did you go through that process?
Yeah, I mean, when I started at Hearst, I was a contractor. I didn't think that I would even ever join full-time. But I did, because it just made sense, logistically, and from given I was bootstrapping and the stage that Birdie was at. I would say last summer, there was a lot of changes happening within the division that I was in that had been announced. And so, and it was coincidentally at the same time that I realized that there were certain paths to go down if I wanted to really truly make a career here. Yes. And I would have to, and I'm not good at giving 50%. And I kind of felt like, and because of the changes happening here, a lot of what I was working on was put on hold while they were figuring out the new org structure. And so, I could have at that point in time paved a specific path at Hearst, but I didn't feel like I could do that and work on Birdie at the same time. And I did give it some serious thought, because it was, it's a fantastic company that's been around for a very long time, and there's, tremendous amount of opportunity here. But I just decided to kind of wait it out and see where things landed. But my focus and my passion in the end really was Birdie. So that's why I decided, that I needed to focus all of my time. And I was getting frustrated that I wasn't making as much progress on Birdie. And it just, unless it's your day job, I didn't feel comfortable going after funding if it wasn't my day job. And so that was definitely gonna get in the way. And I felt like when I did have days here and there when I would take, a day off or whatnot, then if I had like the 9 to 5 to focus on Birdie, I was so productive, so much more productive than I was on the off hours.
Yes.
So I really needed it to be my primary focus.
Full time. Yep. I've read a lot of things about that. Or of course, when I was thinking about leaving my job too, and you hear from other entrepreneurs, I heard an interview with the 2 women that started the Skim, and they kind of said the same thing. They couldn't expect to be taken seriously. So it reminded me when you said about funding, but if they weren't committed themselves, to their company, so they both quit their jobs and said, okay, we're doing this, we're all in. And I do feel like there's that tipping point. It kind of happened for me too, where it's like, okay, if you're really ready and you're in this and this is how you're going, okay, I'm doing it, and it sounds like you were at that point, and it's like, you make a decision and then you go.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was definitely a process, but I never thought that I would, never thought that I would have joined full-time here while working on Birdie, but then with all the changes here, it just
made sense. Yeah. Right. Yes. I'm a big believer in that too. You were jumping with a parachute. You don't just like quit your job and say, I'm starting a business now. You were, for example, like over 2 years, 3 years in the making, and you're still working on it now. So, and, okay, excellent. So how about, what's your projected timing for when Birdie's going to launch? So you're still in development right now.
So I have version 1 that's live, but it's very clunky because it was designed by someone who's not a product designer, moi. And so spent the past 2 years getting a lot of feedback. And so I'd say, actually, we've been working on Birdie 2.0 for the past 6 months. I worked with a team at General Assembly late last fall. But again, the problem with not having it as my full-time job was the lack of momentum. So I started working with the team, but then I hired somebody, and it's just like, when you can only get on a call on the weekends or at night, like, a week from now, you're just going to lose a tremendous amount of momentum. So everything has taken a lot longer when it's not your day job. And so really basically had the beta going, the version 1 for about a year, which is a lot longer than it should have been, but had that going, and then had 2.0 in process, and now it's with my developers, ready for them to work on it. And that'll probably take a month. So I want to have that live 2.0. Hopefully we're at the end of May, hopefully middle of July, and then have it launch. I want to get, any kinks and bugs ironed out, July and August, and hopefully be officially launched in September, October.
Awesome. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. I love also that, this is part of, I think, being the process engineer and thinking about all of that. The fact that they're chirps, I don't know if you said this before, but I love that they're birdie chirps, and that they're meant to be short, and that you can really just read them, get the information you want, and make your decision and go. Yeah,
I'm trying to not only design for myself, but I think that most people find it exhausting and just not a great use of their time and energy to read through like 10 paragraphs on Yelp and TripAdvisor. Some of these review platforms have character minimums. I actually thought about having a character maximum, like a tweet. And it's just, I think when you I also think that Birdie's the equivalent of, if I'm, going to, let's say I've never been to Hoboken and I'm going to Hoboken for dinner and I want a nice restaurant. If I sent you a text message, it would be the equivalent of what you would reply over a text message. It's going to be one line. It's going to be like, go to, the place A and, best margaritas in town, awesome happy hour specials, and their quesadillas are amazing. It'll be the equivalent of that, and enough said. I trust your opinion, and you're going to steer me in the right direction because you're invested in that recommendation because you care about the people who are the recipients of it.
Right.
So you only really need a line when that's the case.
Right. That's true. I love that.
Yeah. And again, efficient, time savings.
Effective. Right. Very, yes, efficient. I like it. Okay. How about in terms of your transition from corporate to entrepreneur? There's obviously a lot of things that you bring over from your experience in the corporate world. I tell myself this a lot too, but you don't unlearn all of your corporate experience when you make this transition. So what would you say has been the most helpful or the biggest strength that you bring from the corporate world into being an entrepreneur?
I think that this is going to go against the grain of most entrepreneurs, but
do it. It's okay.
I think an element of formality. I'm also a bit more old fashioned. I like handwritten thank you notes. We've talked about this. I think that there's a bit of a lost sense of that, but I think that formality can bring with it being very respectful of people's time, showing up to meetings on time. And I think that it can be very easy when you're an entrepreneur and you're wearing a million hats and you're pulled in a million different directions. But the reason why you confirm meetings and you take the time and energy to make sure that it's an effective workspace that you're going to be in, because it's the best use of people's time. And the most important thing, and that's part of, not to keep plugging Birdie, but Birdie, the whole core behind it is to save people time. There's no more valuable resource than people's time. You save people time searching for dinner, a place for dinner. They can spend more time with their family. They can do a lot of other more effective things and more lovely things. And so I think that when you can be respectful of people's time and people's efforts and being very gracious in that regard, which I think that, it is more expected in a corporate environment, and you kind of learn that, that if you can bring that through, which it gets a little bit lost sometimes in the very casual nature of entrepreneurship, I think that there's a lot of value. Again, I am a little bit more, I'm process oriented. So that's true. Shocking, but yeah, I try and instill that even with I have several contractors who I'm working with who are earlier on in their career and they haven't worked in corporate environments. So it's kind of hard, they take things a lot. You realize that when you haven't worked in that corporate environment that, you'll have a meeting on the books and they won't show up. They won't call, especially because a lot of stuff is virtual. But people need to know that that's not okay. You need to, if you're not going to be able to show up for a meeting, you need to give people advance notice because they could have used their time differently and maybe they would have scheduled something else. And so I think that there's a understanding of a bigger picture there.
That's true. And I think, if you don't take yourself seriously enough, how can you expect other people to take you seriously,
Totally.
right? And it's kind of like that. For me, even just giving myself the structure and treating it a little bit more still as if I was in corporate America is helpful, because it makes me feel like I have something around me that I'm used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it could be the same, it's the same way for that. It's just part of, making yourself feel like an established business. Like when Birdie grows so much, and it's a big company, you're going to want to have some of those things in place, because otherwise, and it's not
Exactly.
only that, it's your brand and your reputation too, right? So it adds
Totally.
it adds to that too. That's a really good point. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
So Lauren, so let me ask you, where can people find you if they want to know more about Birdie or what you're up to, or ask you any questions? I'm
Sure.
offering that for you, but
Wonderful. No, I love, we've connected because I love networking and love meeting people, especially people who would be excited about this concept. So right, Birdie is still in beta, so we're not welcoming new users just yet, but you can go to birdieworld.com, and there's a place there where you can submit your email address, so you'll get invited when we do launch. And I always reach out to anyone who sends their email address, just because I like learning about anyone who's intrigued by Birdie. And you can definitely follow us on Instagram. We post really funny chirps or very useful pro tips that people leave on Birdie. So as well as lots of fun food pictures and other memes and whatnot. So I'd say, yeah, birdieworld.com or birdie_world on Instagram.
excellent. Okay. Well, thanks, Lauren. Thanks for your time today. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
you talking with us. And look forward to seeing you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks for all the chirps.
You're welcome. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video interview with Lauren Rosenthal from Birdie. I think she had some great tips and learnings and information for starting a business that is backed by software. There's a lot to the technical aspect of things that, it can be very interesting for anyone thinking about that space or wanting to start something in that space. So from learning, it's great that she shared some of her experiences and what she went through. I also really liked when she talked about her tip for corporate America skills that translate over to being an entrepreneur. I think it's very helpful and a very good point to make about still treating your business and being a little bit formal with your business. It'll give you an extra level of professionalism, and I really like that she spoke about that. If you'd like more information, feel free to reach out to her. You can visit birdieworld.com. I'll have information in the show notes. And you can also, of course, visit thetransitionscollective.com and reach out if you have any questions or want to know anything. You're thinking about doing something on your own, feel free. It starts with a question, and if you don't ask, you'll never know. So hope to see you soon, and come again. Bye.